So, slightly fewer of you. Okay. So, the previous talk was a wee bit geeky, a little bit of programming. Now, even geekier still. What happens under the covers of SuperOffice when we're dealing with webhooks? This is all me. So, webhooks, what are they? How do we make one? What do we need in order to make one? We can configure them in various ways. And what is actually happening under the covers when we're sending these things off? All right. So, anyone know what a webhook is? So we've talked a lot about them, but basically they are a publish-subscribe pattern for web applications. They've been around for well on at least 10 years. The idea being that an application out on the web can say, "Hello, SuperOffice, could you please tell me when things happen and inform me on this URL? Thank you very much." And then SuperOffice will post along notifications in the background while you do your work. It'll tell this other application, well, he's just done this, he's created that, he's deleted this thing. And the partner application doesn't have to do a lot of extra work. It doesn't have to do polling, essentially. It doesn't have to go and ask, like, has anything happened? Has anything happened? What's changed? What's new this time? So it makes for a much more event-driven flow rather than sort of having to do queries all the time. So it's more efficient and everyone's happier. So it's as simple as it's a web call, it's a post, essentially, or that's the usual thing. It's a post that occurs when something happens. And we just send, traditionally you send along a JSON structure with a bunch of information, so describing the thing that happened. So for example, when you click create in the appointment dialog, then what happens is the web client, calls NetServer and says, "Save the appointment, please." And NetServer will do an insert into the database and then return. And then by some magic, a little bit later on, NetServer will do this post off to the external system saying, like, the thing has happened now. You have created appointment 13. And so this thing is there's the clicker. Yay. So there's a whole bunch of different events that we've sort of cooked up, and the names are sort of intended to underline the point that these things are sent after. Like, the thing happens, and then afterward we send the event telling you that the thing happened. So it has already happened. You cannot change it. You cannot stop it happening. So most of the major things in SuperOffice have a set of events, essentially. So activity covers appointments and documents. So it fires on both of those. Activity created, changed, and deleted. We have similar things for associate users. Contacts. Document gets the normal ones, document created, changed, and deleted. They also get a special one, document edited, which means that somebody has checked in, like did a check-in essentially, on the contents. So if something's using kind of the file-based mechanism, then we can know about that. If it's cloud-based, like Google Docs, then we don't really know, and the event won't fire. Person created and changed and deleted. Then we have a couple of events for consent. So people can consent to things and unconsent, like take away consent for different things in the GDPR system. So those get fired off. Now, to find out what they actually consented to and things like that, you have to go get the information, get the person. Because the event itself doesn't tell you what they've consented to. That would be leaking out private information. So don't do that. Projects and project members, and then sale stakeholders. And then on Friday last week, we got ticket created and ticket changed. Yeah. So very, very fresh. And so we hope to add a whole bunch of more stuff around tickets and customer service. That's kind of the new thing now for us, is to get that more integrated into the NetServer APIs. But actually, well, question then. What events do you wish were here? Come on, you almost had your hand up. Yes. So just, you're on a whole different server when you get the notification, okay? So there's no way you can affect what goes into the database. It's already gone. It's like, that's already happened. So just accept that. It's already there. They'll be there.
And if you write a slow web code, you're not going to make it from.
Nope. These things are dispatched in the background asynchronously. We'll come back to that. Yeah, selection members and things like that. Yeah, yeah, maybe. There's a selection created is probably the easier one. Yeah, static selection members. Yes, those could probably be hooked up, but. We shall see what we can do. But that's a good idea. Bulk update completed. No, not yet. You know, what we have is what's here, but those are good suggestions. Send them in. Or make a note on the app, you know. Ooh, undeleted. Good point. That should be doable. Yeah. This was made kind of at the same time as they were making the undelete functionality, so that was like, oh. Yep. Contact merge. Yeah, those are like all things which have kind of explicit entry points are easier to add in. Yeah. Yeah, well, that's a good one. Yeah. So yeah, I hope you're writing these down and sending them in. It's like I'm not. But yeah. All right. Sale. So sale, we added a bunch of extra, more as convenience. You could probably figure these out based on the list of field change events, and so when a sale is changed and the sale state because those are handy. Let's see if we can. There we go. Way over here. There we go. These ones are kind of special. So they're more for convenience. So it's like those are things which people will probably be interested in. So we figured instead of having to force everybody to filter the sale changed event and so on, we fire sale changed, but we also fire kind of a special event if the state has changed and to lost or to sold, or if it's marked as completed. User created. Yeah, associate created is there. That's essentially that. So yeah. We'll have to investigate. So what happens when we actually fire an event is the event has kind of a set description. So there's an ID, a random ID. There's no meaning in it. There's no pattern. It's just random. It's to help you if you're worried about duplication or something. Like it would be very strange if you got duplicate events, but in any case, it's there to help you kind of detect that if you're worried about it. Timestamps also, if you're curious as to when something happened, or if you say you want to see like did this happen before the previous one. Again, this would be very, very unusual. It would mean the clock on the server is running backwards. But again, they say you should have these things in there, so we put them in. Changes is a list of the fields which have changed. So it's just the name of the record fields that have been modified in this particular update. The values which you would sort of normally expect to see there are not there because security. Then there's the name of the event, like the thing which has happened. So in this case, contact created. There's the primary key, which tells us the ID of the thing that was created. The entity, like the thing, so usually this is pretty much the same thing as in the contact, in the event name. Context identifier in online, this tells you like which instance, which tenant. If you're on site, it'll say default. Changed by associate tells you what user kind of triggered this thing. And then the name of the webhook that you registered this under. So you can recognize that, oh, this came because of this thing, this registration. So the payload will always have this shape. It'll always have these properties on it. So here's our webhook endpoint. This is where we register or sort of add our own webhooks to the system. So you can get a list of them, you can add new ones, you can get a particular one, you can update a particular one, or you can delete one, or get rid of it. And then we added a bunch of additional functions because who doesn't like some additional functions? So there's the test method where you can sort of try out your test. Oh, and I see the URL is wrong. There's no ID in there. So you can try out your definition beforehand. So if you're building a admin user interface, you can have a little test button to try out a registration. You can get the last error. So if a webhook is failing, to a webhook. And then the last one is kind of fun. You can trigger an event. You can signal some random event that you can simulate sort of events that might otherwise be difficult to trigger. Or you can sort of make your own events. You can create your own events and just fire them off. And if someone subscribed to those events, they'll be notified, just like everything else. So, in order to receive a webhook, you need a website with a URL. And then you need to be able to accept post requests. So just having a web page up on AWS or something isn't quite going to cut it because it doesn't do anything with post. So there's a couple of different sites out there. There's the Webhook site and a bunch of others which will create one for you. And then you can, it'll generate a bucket, a random URL for you, and then show you whatever's been sent to that URL. You all familiar with these things? You've tried these tools before? No? Yes? Stony silence. Okay, so here's one. This is something called request bin, and they say basically make your own copy and host it for free in a cloud somewhere, and that's what we've done. Basically, you push the green button, and it gives you a random URL that you can start posting to. And this lets you debug webhooks, essentially. So you get that random URL. You can just about see it. It gets cut off here, but up here you can just see that like there's a random string on the end and then question mark inspect. We take that URL and stick it into a webhook definition. So we say, okay, we want to post to webhook, and then listen to these two events, contact created and contact deleted, and the target URL is wherever we want to do the notification. So in this case, we want to put in the URL from this thing for the target URL. And then what NetServer is going to do is it's going to check that we've got an HTTPS, and we're going to check that the thing answers. If we do a post to it, it should get a response, a valid response rather. It's going to check that the certificate for the URL is correct, is valid, it's public and trusted. And also, you have to be an administrator to create webhooks. Like if you are not an administrator, you will be denied. So random users can't create their own webhooks to sort of systems. You have to be an admin to create this thing. Good so far. Let's see. So if we, let me see if I can make this work. Whoa. Handy. So let's see. So here I have a little test. It's an on-site site because why should everything be in online? And so here I have get, and then blah, 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 webhook. And that gives me a list of all the registered webhooks in the system. And I fired this. Let's see. There we go. So we want to add one. We'd say post. Post. And if we just send that, it will go. You must provide a body. Okay. Then we go body, JSON. So we need a name, in quotes, name, expand world 2018. We need a bunch of events. And that's an array of strings. Like so. So we say contact created, for example. And then finally, target URL. Target URL. And then, where should we post this? Let's, oh, that's right. We need to make one of those. One of those little webhook. So let's see. Where did my SO bin Heroku app? There we go. There we go. If I can drag that over here. So here we go. So now I create a new bin and I get a random URL here. No, damn it. Copy, and then we can stick that into Postman here. Bloop. So there. Now, if we post that, you said, there we go. Post. Oh, and is it not secure? Oh, so GPS. Ah, and I must be administrator. So then we go here, authorization. I must be user level 0. And there we go. Now it's created. It came back 200 OK. And if we say, actually, if I post this to the test endpoint, it'll tell me, oh, was this definition valid? Basically, it says like, yes, it succeeded. And these are the headers and message body I got back from the endpoint, where it basically says like, yes, this is all good. So now if I go get the webhook, I have a thing and it's defined. And if we go look at the here, we now have a test event that's been posted. So we have the net server has kind of gone and talked to this bucket, this website for us. And it sent along a bunch of headers. It said, this is a test. And then the event is called test. And there's a little sort of empty, or not empty, but very small little body that says like, oh, this is a test event, don't worry. But the website caught it and logged it for us. So now everything's hunky-dory. Let's see. So you saw a bunch of things kind of go wrong there. And we'll step through all of those. So there's a bunch of other things we can define on a webhook also. Not just the URL, but there's a thing called a secret. We can have you as the recipient of the webhook would like to know that this came from SuperOffice. How can we prove to the webhook recipient that you're the one who asked us to call you. You can trust us. You're not some random guy trying to fake out your system by posting fake events. Because after all, an event is just an HTTP post. Anybody could do an HTTP post if they know your URL. And if your URL isn't random enough, some bad guy could go in there and start lying about what's happening in SuperOffice. He'd post a bunch of contact deleted events, to make you delete your own copies of the data. That would be bad. So the secret is a way of trying to mitigate this. Like the other way is to set up certificates where you trust each other, and there's like this whole HTTPS kind of. Nobody can make that work, and it's not something you can make work automatically. It requires a whole bunch of manual interventions, so no one does that. Instead, you agree on a secret. You have a shared secret that you set up beforehand. So when you register the webhook, you basically have your secret string as part of the webhook definition, and that secret is then used to hash the contents of the webhook, and it's stuck in a special header, essentially on when the webhook is delivered. It's delivered along with a header that says like this is the hash value. So what you then can do is you can take the body that's received, hash it with the same secret, which you know because you put it in there when you registered, and then see if the two match. And if the two are the same, then it's like, okay, this definitely came from SuperOffice, or at least from someone who knows my secret. So in that case, you have you have good hackers. There's state of the webhook. A webhook is usually active. It means it'll fire. It can be stopped. It means like don't send any more events, but keep the registration. And then there's too many errors. If the webhook target, the place that we're posting to, stops answering, or starts returning error messages. If it does that 10 times in a row, then we'll stop bothering you. We'll say, okay, never mind. You're obviously doing something else, so we won't bother you anymore. There's a type field. At the moment, we just have webhooks. The idea is if we come up with other ways of using this stuff, like, for example, triggering CRM scripts, for example, that would be something we'd put in there. So you'd like trigger a CRM script. And then the last two, headers and properties, are used for customizing the headers and bodies of the webhook payloads, essentially, that get sent out. I'll show you some examples of that. So this is a typical kind of webhook definition. Name, events, target URL, some secret, and the last two you don't really need. They'll be defaulted if they're not there. The headers and parameters thing. So if you have headers defined, let's see, there we go. Headers and properties there. So these are defined on the definition. It means they're the same for all of the webhook definition, or all the webhook deliveries, but they then show up over here in the headers and down here in the body of the payload. So for example, so you can ship in values that you need, for example, to authenticate along the way, or to get through a router or firewall. Or you can record data there that's specific to your webhook that you doesn't sort of come from SuperOffice, but that you need to keep track of. Like, this customer is known as this number in my systems. SuperOffice doesn't know that, but you do. So that's up to you to use. If you don't use them, everything will still work. So there you go. You can see those headers get added from these, and that little property gets stuck in there. This is the other one. All right. So webhooks, requirements. We need to have webhooks turned on. By default, webhooks are off. We have them on, default on, and that caused no end of interesting problems. So webhooks have to be explicitly turned on. That means when they're on, it means that the webhook engine kind of rumbles into life and starts dispatching post events when things happen. And that's great if you're kind of CRM web on the server. That's a great thing. If you're CRM web inside kind of Outlook Mail Link or something, that is probably not what you want. Because the changes that you're making will be handled kind of by a server that will be sending out events. You don't need to kind of send out the same event again. You don't want the thing happening twice. Your URLs, the target URLs have to be HTTPS, they have to be secure. They have to have a valid certificate. So your self-signed certificate won't be acceptable. You can turn that off if you like in development, but for production use, it's like you should really have appropriate SSL certificate. And that URL must answer a post request with 200 OK. Like your user must be an administrator, otherwise you cannot create new webhooks. And if you're online, then your app must have access to the webhook agent. It's like yet another thing that must be checked off, just like access to the user agent. So by default, apps don't have access to webhooks. You have to ask for that permission. So yes, Postman, create a webhook. Okay, we did that. If we just send off one, we got that unauthorized. So we add some authorization. We add a username, password. And it says like, no, you must be administrator. Or in this case, again, towards online, it's like, no, you must have application token. If we're talking to an online site, which these screenshots are, then having kind of a ticket is not enough. You must also have an application token. So then we add that header to say that. And then it says bad request. You must fill in the body. Like, oh, okay, we'll put in the body. And then the thing that I did, of course, was put in HTTP, and it goes like, no, you must have HTTPS. Still, okay. So, and here's a thing. So you can try this out yourself. There's a site called Bad SSL, which has like lots of different SSL errors for you to try out. So if you can try and use, for example, self-signed certificate from Bad SSL. In that case, you'll get a nice error message saying, nope, this URL has a certificate validation error. It is, it's not terminated in a trusted root certificate. So I'm not going to trust this one. But then finally, if we post to a proper URL, it'll say, yay, okay, and register our URL. All hunky-dory. And then the test gets registered on our receiving bucket. And it's a test event, so it's like, okay, good, everything is there. Now you can test these things before trying to register, so you can you don't have to try and register just to get the response. If you post to the test endpoint, it'll do a little test call and then show you what happens. Did it work or not? So then if we actually go and do something in SuperOffice, we get the event received in the bucket. So we'll get a header that says this is the event that happened, and that event ID. And there you see the SuperOffice signature also in the headers, which is a base 64 hash of the body. So you take that whole thing, run it through SHA-256, and you should get the same values up there. And then you can say, oh, yes, this came from SuperOffice. And you see the structure is the same. So here we're creating a new one. It's listing out all of the fields, essentially. Since it's creating a new one, it's inserting values into all the fields. So the list of changes is all of the fields in the contact table. Questions? Anyone? No? State. So we can change a webhook to stopped using patch. We can say, stop this webhook, don't send any more events. And it will just stop. But by default, they start as active. So and then yes, / last error gives us the error message of like whatever the response was from the server that that wasn't okay last time. So I can see the need now for a endpoint which is basically post to, webhook123/test to say, no, try it again now, see if it's working now. But at the moment, we don't have that, but that would make sense. Being able to kind of, it's like, no, I fixed the service, see if you can talk to it and reactivate. So, custom events. If these are basically, if you want to invent your own triggers, and you can do that. You don't have to register anything, but there's no list of kind of custom events in the system. You just basically invent a new name. Like in Mark's case, you might invent, bucket full or something. And then you can basically post it. You post API Webhook, whatever your name is, and then the ID you want to associate with it. If you don't put an ID there, it'll fill in 0. And the body is basically an object with properties and values that you can sort of send along. And that just gets shipped along with the webhook. So if anyone has registered an interest in the bucket full message, then they will be notified. And this is the way customer service signals events. So there's no ticket created method in NetServer, but customer service can say, oh, post the ticket full message for me, please, because, or ticket created rather, because I have just created a ticket. So this is handy if you want to sort of extend the webhook system with your own stuff. Here you can see the wonderful admin GUI in SuperOffice. There's no admin GUI. There are the API endpoints. There's no, maybe, eventually someone will get around, notice that we should maybe have one, but at the moment there's nothing. So you're on your own. Yeah. Configuration options. Let's see. There's a webhooks section. You can enable webhooks. So by default, webhooks are off. So CRM web installations get this kind of when they do upgrades or install now. They enable webhooks is true for CRM web installations, but almost nothing else kind of runs with webhooks on. And then there's 2 other which are useful for when you're developing, sort of requiring HTTPS. You can turn that off so that the system doesn't sort of complain about HTTP localhost. You don't have to have a certificate at all. And then there's, if you do have certificates, but they're self-signed or development certificates where the machine name doesn't match or something like that, you can say validate HTTPS off or false, and you can do development without having to have 100% valid certificates on your site. So if we turn webhooks off, what happens? Basically what happens is all the webhook endpoints basically return 501 not supported. Like they basically error out saying like, nope, nothing here, nothing can work. And so this, you might remember this diagram. So the thing that happens is the events get served after the thing has happened. You cannot change what has already happened. It has happened. And these things get shipped out in the background. So they happen asynchronously. The user sort of process here is not affected at all by kind of how long it takes to ship out the webhooks. Like it happens on a background thread. So the site doesn't get slower because you add webhooks. It works the same as before. So what happens is, you have all these users, they're pounding away on the NetServer, on the website, And they're generating these IDs, their changes. Then just get posted to a queue, and like more and more and more events get queued up. And then there's a background thread that sort of eats off the other end of the queue. So one after the other gets dispatched. And they happen in order. So there's very little chance of events coming out of order, because at the moment there's just one thread. And we're kind of, we'll see if that's enough or if we need to do something more complex there. But at the moment, it's basically, it's going to queue up more and more notifications, and then sort of slowly in the background dispatch one after the other. So if there's a lot of things happening, it might take a while before your notification actually gets shipped out, because the background thread is kind of eating away at the list of stuff to do. So there's no batching of requests. Like, there's always one event per webhook call. We don't group them up and say like, oh, here's like 15 contact createds. It makes life a lot easier, I think, for the recipients. You don't have to deal with kind of multiple events in one notification. Boom. Security. Do we care? No. Security. It makes life hard. So yes. So yeah, this is the algorithm and whatnot for computing the secret. I think there's even sample code up on community. But yes, as the recipient, basically, what you have to do is look at the hash in the header and compute your own hash and see if they're the same. And if they're the same, then you can be reasonably sure that this came from the site that you originally registered with. Yeah. So all of that into hash algorithm, and then base64 encode it, and you should get the same value. And if you don't, then it's probably because there's a character encoding thing, or you've stripped out spaces, or there are so many different ways that calculation can go wrong. It's like if everything matches, it's like, oh, definitely. It is absolutely for sure from SuperOffice, because it's such a pain in the ass to calculate correctly.
Are there plans for any DevNet packages which does this for you, so our partners don't have to have all the issues?
I don't know. Do we need to? Do we need packages to do this for you? Yeah. Oh, well, the question is like, what languages do people want this in? Like, the PHP or Node or C#? Who uses that? So yeah, maybe. Other questions? It's like, that's one question. Come on, you can at least 3. Yeah. So how do yes, if it's gone into the error state, like your server went down for an hour or something, like you Windows Update got a hold of it, and suddenly, boom, everything is broken. And so the webhook has gone into the errored state because it tried to post 10 events, and your server didn't answer for any of them. So after 10 consecutive failures, it goes like, okay, this webhook will disable as errored. How do you turn it back on? It's basically, you just patch. You need to do a little patch on the webhook. So you say patch webhook blah blah blah. State is active. It's just a matter of putting it back into the active state. So you can do a patch, or you can do put to update it. And once it's back inactive, then it'll start firing again. Yes.
So I played with this a while ago when it was just released, and I had some issues when sometimes events came through and sometimes they were not.
No?
Did I do something wrong, or is there something?
No, definitely you did something wrong. The events go through all the time. I don't know. I have no idea. So you could look in the last error to see what, like if there was an event that didn't come through, like is there an error message logged on that webhook? Was there, go look in the net server logs. There's a whole bunch of logging that happens if hooks kind of get error messages or sort of don't succeed. You can still turn on error logging. You can talk to the nice people, and they can enable error logging for you. Yeah, but last error doesn't require any of that. The last error is stored in the database, and it's so you can go fetch that. Or actually, it's not stored in the database. It's stored in memory, so it's but it'll be there for as long as the app pool hasn't recycled. If you, yeah, it's if you create it on Pocket, Pocket will do a net server call to update the thing, and it's up. Yep, there we go. So when the web client is talking to net server or Pocket is talking to net server will fire up the and talk to the database, and then afterward do the notifications. So unless Pocket is configured, like the instance that Pocket is talking to must be configured to fire webhooks. That's kind of the requirement there. And as far as I know, Pocket talks to the web instance, like that's the same website. I don't think there's a special installation that it talks to, so they should fire. Yeah, the Windows client doesn't use net server that much to talk to the database, so there's no eventing from that. So if you're using the Windows client, there's there's a bunch of stuff happening that isn't going to be captured. So get them off the Windows client. It's going away, people. Just face it. Eventually we'll come around and pay you money to stop using it. We're working on it, okay? More scripting, more hooks, more flexibility and stuff. Other questions? No? Let's see. Drat, I'm early again. We have another 10 minutes, I think, before we're due to end. Yep. Because now it's almost lunchtime. Yeah, so if we're lucky, there'll be early lunch. Yeah. All right, so anyway, we're not leaving here until we've got some more questions.